Let's start again. So it doesn't really sound the BGM. Noclip for the YouTube later. Noclip documentary part 1.1.0. Yay, yay, yay. Yeah. We're gonna relax and watch the video. With no BGM. But yeah, feel free to suggest any songs to react, Ethan. I'm gonna add them later. I'm gonna go through chat and add stuff.
Very deep into the culture of Japan. Yeah. Originally a spin-off from Masafumi Miyamoto's father's powerline construction firm, for over 30 years its games have helped power the rise of Japanese games development. There are no shortage of games that live under the Square Enix banner, but none as big as Final Fantasy.
Hello, my lord.
Welcome. Welcome, King. Welcome. Ascending in Firefly film. Oh, okay. PGR Ascending in Firefly. Okay, cool. I'm gonna do that. But yeah, what I was saying before, Square Enix was like around for decades at this point. They had changes in they had complete changes in their structures, complete changes in their everything. But you don't realize just how close to bankruptcy they were several times in their life cycle. From they were really close to bankruptcy on when they released Final Fantasy 1, really close to bankruptcy because Final Fantasy 14 14 completely botched its first launch. They were really close there with like complete and utter overspending of resources there. They were really close to it several times already. So they're no strangers to complete and utter changes within the company at this point. They had rough patches, good patches, rough patches, good patches. It really depends. Right now, I think they're experiencing a very.
Also recommend the other backrooms devlogs from Fancy.
All right, I'll drop them in. I'll drop them all in the playlist. But yeah, it's just like it's such a rich history of a company. It's like kind of like a part of the culture at this point.
Western perspective, there's an air of mythos around the company. The accepted truth behind the series title is that it was named Final Fantasy as it was Square's make or break game to avoid impending bankruptcy.
Yeah, as I was saying.
The answer has more to do with creating an acronym that can be pronounced by
FF.
Eastern and West.
I think it was kind of both a little bit. Final Fantasy is really easy to pronounce. Even from both Japanese and Western perspective, Final Fantasy. It's just like it's both kind of like a FFFFF. It's like very, very catchy, very bouncy. But I do think that it had been in part because of some difficulties, last-ditch attempts to create a really standing franchise. Because I don't think I know any other Square Enix franchise that has been like very standing. That started earlier than Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy was the first, and I think they get. Did they make Resident Evil? Pretty sure they made Resident Evil, unless I'm. Oh no, that's Capcom. Okay, I'm tripping. But yeah, Final Fantasy is basically their like big flagship title at this point. Its fluidity was really important for it, though. That's considered sure. I don't. Maybe you know what? One day we could one day try binging Final Fantasy series, like from the first game to the 16th. Obviously, I'm already playing 14th. I plan to continue playing 14th, and that will take a while. But I haven't played 11. I haven't played a lot of other older games. I have played 7th, but I haven't played a lot of other games. So we could potentially one day do a binge of Final Fantasy series if you guys are interested in that.
Western audiences, it's that first story that gets told. That's the legacy of this series. Stories about adventures that get passed from generation to generation, as nearby as the arcades of Akihabara and as far as the playgrounds of Europe. As the Final Fantasy series has moved from numeral to numeral, there have been high points and low. But with each new game comes the promise of a new story, a new myth.
I think that's the strongest points of Final Fantasy is that they are not forced to be connected together in any way, shape, or form. That is basically the strongest points of Final Fantasy. Each of them can be a separate world. Each of them can be unique adventure. Whatever. It's good.
The story of what happened with Final Fantasy XIV is one such myth. What
Yeah.
we know about it comes from old reviews, archived message board threads, and through conversations with those who were there.
I think I was there partially myself. I cannot consider myself a player, but I did watch someone else play the game when it was 1.0. It was an experience. It was really hard to enjoy the game fully, if that makes sense, right? But it was I never really got the account myself because it was broke. I was a broke ass bitch in terms of like gaming stuff. But yeah. Plus, I didn't really like MMOs back then, so I was just basically watching the other person play. But it does feel like I was there in a way.
The reason for this is that the original version of Final Fantasy XIV
Doesn't exist anymore.
exist anymore.
Yeah.
Unlike the vast majority of other old games, there is no way of playing it.
No.
It was redacted, painted over. Where once stood a game that threatened to sink the Final Fantasy brand forever, now stands the second most popular subscription MMO in the world.
Approaching
And as the
first
years
in
pass
some
us,
in some
myth of
cases.
that original version and its incredible redemption story are at risk of disappearing.
Yeah.
How did it all happen? How did the same studio that shipped a broken mess turn it all around in 2 years?
We're gonna learn about it, but this is what I put as an example of why exactly a lot of Western developers try to say. I mean, not developers. Western people try to say, "Oh, this game will do the Final Fantasy thing." The Final Fantasy. You will see just how hard it was to pull off the Final Fantasy 14 thing, and just how unrealistic it is to expect the same from Western developers.
Why did they make the decision to keep the old version still alive while secretly working on a brand new game?
Yeah.
And how did they manage to make all of this, the redesign and rebirth, part of the game's lore? We knew this.
Yeah, that's. I think that's the most brilliant thing. I think we're gonna hear about that too later. But that's the most brilliant thing. They actually made the world. Everything makes sense within the world as well, which is really good. Really good.
Was a story worth telling, not only for those who were there to see it all go down, but for the millions of you who have never heard about this, who never knew the extraordinary.
I
lengths
heard
and
and
efforts
seen
it
it.
went to
Yeah,
save this.
extraordinary
So
lengths.
we did just that. Pack your bags, friends. Noclip is heading to Tokyo.
I'm gonna try to comment from the perspective of someone who was there, and I do have vivid memories of this entire saga happening. Even though I never really played it, but I do have vivid memories of like watching this unfold. It was so unique. It was such a unique experience. I don't think I ever experienced something like that ever again. That kind of story arc, practically, within not the game itself, but within the development behind the game. It was something, I tell you that much. Music's cool. Vibing. Let's vibe for a bit. Why not? Death and Rebirth for Final Fantasy XIV Online. You can see VTubers in the background. Or like an anime character. Let me catch that. Yeah, see? See what I mean? See? There's like a DSIF. It's some anime property, I think. It's either like an idol thing or something else similar to that. Interesting. Oh, there's a KFC there. Japan is an interesting country. Especially when it comes to Akihabara and everything. It's kind of like a mix of snazzily dressed people and all the branding, all the relaxed people, all the shiny things. Just like business suits are walking side by side, but with cosplayers. It's kind of like interesting. It's a weird conundrum of various themes that do not align with each other. And Western brands intertwined with constant neon signs with Japanese of like books and everything and Books, novels, game shops, manga shops, maid cafes, normal cafes, butler cafes, and everything is just like so intertwined together. It's interesting. It's easily to get overwhelmed when you are in a place like Akihabara. I hope you guys hear me in comparison with the video. Just in case.
Hello and welcome to Shinjuku.
Welcome to
Tokyo,
Shinjuku.
home of Godzilla, restaurants full of dancing robots,
Yep.
and Square Enix.
It's Square
one of the
Enix.
most prolific video game companies in the world.
Even though there are problems, there still are.
Playing
Yeah.
catch up with this story, playing the latest version of the game, talking to players, and watching community retrospective series like the Speakers Network's fantastic fall and rise of Final Fantasy XIV. My goal to make sure we asked the right questions when we sat down with the team. During our time here in Shinjuku, we're going to talk to everyone from the engineers who worked on the original game to localization leads, community managers,
This guy.
team. During our time here in Shinjuku, to everyone from the localization.
This guy. Very important. A very important phase in the overall structure of the game dev and how it went. Surprisingly, even though he's localizer, I wish more people were were that passionate about localizing things from Japan. Sure, they were like they're a little too wordy at times. I'd say, just a tad too wordy for my taste. But yeah, I just wish people were more excited about how they end up localizing everything, how they end up completely absorbing themselves in everything.
Managers and even this.
I do have to ask, do you guys hear me okay? Compared to the video? I'm just curious. I'm just asking because I'm curious. I will continue the video after this. Well, I will continue video now, but feel free to answer if you want to. Okay, CEO of the company. He was a CEO, right? He is no longer a CEO right now,
Fall and
I
rise
think.
of Final Fantasy XIV happened in real time in front of millions of people around the world. But we wanted to know about this story from an entirely new perspective, from inside the
Yeah.
corporate machine that made it happen, that led to its terrible launch and ultimately its incredible rebirth.
Yeah.
My name is Michael Christopher Koji.
Koji.
I am the English localization lead for
Yeah.
Final Fantasy XIV. My middle name being Koji. It's not something I
Okay.
gave myself. It's a name my father gave me. My father was stationed in Japan for 2 years in the Navy when he
Yeah.
was young. Went back to the States. Mom.
I think he's around the age of where I don't think. How old is Koji? How old is Koji? Yeah, that sounds about right, honestly. Like father being that age and being stationed in Japan after all the shenanigans that happened with the war. Koji. Yeah. Koji, how old is he? Age. How old are you? How old is he? Like 40s, maybe. Seems like he seems like in his 40s. Damn, can't see it. It's fine. I don't really want to ask too much about how old the guy is. It's definitely worth noting that he might have been his father was around that time. It seems like, but still, yeah, it's kind of cool.
Mom had me.
Yeah.
Wanted to give me a Japanese name. The family was having none of that, so they kind of snuck it in the middle name. But then they always called me Koji, and so I guess the joke was on the rest of the family.
Yep.
My dad being in the Navy didn't really learn a lot about Japan, other than he really liked Japan, but didn't learn any of the language. So I always knew that my name was Japanese, but beyond that, I really didn't know anything about Japan. But there was always that little seed in there. And then
I mean, if you were born and someone gave you the name of a culture, and then it kind of grows into being this mysterious place that has a part of you, a tiny sliver, a tiny part of your origin that you don't really know how to explain. So it always will be sitting there and be like annoying and compel you to investigate further. It's like basically it's a given at this point.
when I got into high school, there's a Japanese class, and I like games. Oh, they make games in Japan.
Of course.
They let me study Japanese. If I study Japanese, I can play all those cool Japanese games that I
And it
can't
developed,
out
yeah.
in America.
And it developed,
kind
yeah.
of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
When I graduated from high school, I took a trip to Japan for 3 weeks, homestay type of thing, and I fell in love with it. And during that period, I got to visit a lot of schools and a lot of English classes in those schools. And I thought, wow, I could probably I know English.
I know English. Of course you know English. I think part of the reason why people are so... what a face. Sorry, Koji. I didn't mean to stop it on your face. Part of the reason why I think a lot of people want to go to Japan, again, it's the same kind of mystique with the games, either be with the games or with the animes or whatever. And then they either fall in love with it completely or they completely hate it. Like it's either or. It's neither both. It's never both. It's never a middle ground. It's like either all love it or hate it. I loved it myself. Even though I'm like a big dude, I got a lot of staring in my direction. Cause I'm a very big bearded dude. What the fuck do you expect? When I was there, I sort of pushed myself to absolutely expect something like that happening, right? But still, even aside from all the awkwardness and all the weird shit that happened there, with all the staring and approaching and everything, I think I still enjoyed myself pretty well. I enjoyed myself a lot. I don't think I would stay there without a good knowledge of Japanese now, because I think it would offset my strong gaijin looks if I knew Japanese well instead of not well, if that makes sense. Part of the reason why I'm really trying to get into I tried to slide into DMs of a lot of Japanese creators, VTubers mostly, obviously.
Easy. It wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, but I studied a couple years at a university in America, then transferred over to Japan.
Actually, let me switch my chair real quick. Okay, let me see. Let me see. I need to see if you guys still see me, okay? Okay, and then this here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna cut it out later during the reaction. But yeah, okay, so I'm just gonna ramble in right now.
4 years at a university in Japan.
Started with, yep.
Got my teaching license, and yeah,
It's hard work being a teacher.
It's really hard work.
I loved it, but I mean, it was very draining.
It's I talked to several teachers, people on my side of things in my life, and it's basically like you go wake up, you go to school, you spend all the time with like complete asshat children every day. Well, sometimes they're not asshat children, but you spend a lot of time with children. Then you go home, then you spend there some time and see if you can like participate in some club. There's a basketball club, there's like sports club. They have like sports club and culture clubs there. You need to also attend to that if you are someone who's overseeing the club. Then you need to go there and do homework stuff. You need to basically grade all the homeworks and everything, and then you need to return home, and then you think about the plan for tomorrow's work. tomorrow's home lesson or tomorrow's thing or whatever, and then you have barely enough time to do anything else during the week, and God forbid trying to do anything within the exam week. That's like catastrophe.
And that's why pretty much after you'd go to school 6 in the morning,
Yeah.
morning basketball practice because I was the basketball coach.
Yes.
Because as my principal said, hey, you're tall. You're the basketball coach.
Yes.
Then you get into class.
And considering the fact that you're gaijin, you're most likely taller than people around you. If you're gaijin from like the West, you probably are taller than most people around you. I am 6'3". Normal height in Japan is, let me see, like normal height for Japan people. Normal height Japan. It's average. It's 5'7", 5'2", and 5'7". 5'7" for male, 5'2" for female. So you can imagine you're towering over things because this is average height, and it doesn't detract from a lot of people who are much shorter, because average is like the middle ground between the short and tall. Tall, so 5'10", 5'8" is already tall for them.
He observing.
Hey observer, hey to you too. Hey observer, why am I saying hello to me? Hello, how are you doing? We're watching the documentary and like discussing stuff.
I mean, I'd have my homeroom class, then I'd have 6 or 7 other classes teaching. Then you'd have after school. All of a sudden, it's there's after school basketball, and then you'd get home and you'd correct. So I was really always at school every day. It was very draining, and I would go home and I would play FF11. It was how I was able to relax, and being able to go into my little room and turn off the lights and put on my headphones and get into that world of Vana'diel was something that helped me escape from the stress. And then it just happened to be one day I was online.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting how games help out with the stress and everything, the MMOs. I think it was back then 2003, 2004, where Final Fantasy on 11 came out as like one of the first purely quote-unquote Japanese MMOs. Plus it came out on PS2, if I'm not mistaken, PlayStation 2 or 1, after they introduced a new mod that basically allowed it to play online. And it was the first console MMORPG, because most MMOs back then were PC, right? They were PC. They were World of Warcraft that came out recently, around the same time as this game, actually. A little later than this game, actually. But around the same time as this game, World of Warcraft came out. There were EverQuest, there were a lot of other, there was RuneScape, but all of those games were PC. None of them were on console. You see a lot of the games that are currently out, they come out on console. That was not a thing back then, because back then the online functionality was just basically added to the game consoles. It was not a thing before. It was just couch co-op before. But yeah.
Checking for 11 related information, and I saw that Square Enix was looking for a translator, and it just kind of, wow. That would be really cool.
That would be really cool.
Koji wasn't alone. Final Fantasy XIV was launched in 2010, but
2010. So original Final Fantasy currently is 13 years old, if I'm not mistaken, around 13 years old. Though you will see here explained here, but yeah, the actual version of the Final Fantasy right now we're playing, it's a bit younger.
the story of this game starts 8 years earlier with the launch of Final Fantasy XI.
8 years, 2002. Yeah, 2002. Yep.
Square's first MMO, the early days of online.
Yep.
Many of the team who worked on 14 started on 11. One of those was Kasuga-san, who joined the company in 1999 to build a network infrastructure for this fledgling MMO.
自分はネットワークとサーバー担当で入っていて、
Network Simulator Matters.
一番最初にやっていたのが、
Yeah.
当時プレイステーション2で初めて、厳密にはドリームキャストがその前にあるんですけれども、プレイステーションプラットフォームとしてはオンライン要素が入った初めての時期だったので、 プレイステーション2でネットワークを作るために、TCP/IP のドライバーを作ったりとか。
Actually, Final Fantasy XI came out 2 years prior to World of Warcraft. Final Fantasy Online came out 18th of March 2002, and World of Warcraft came out on 23rd of November 2004. Interesting. I was not aware that they had 2 years of difference between each other. Because it's like, I think it was like closer to the end of 2004. It's basically November, December. It was basically the tail end of 2004 where it came out. Meanwhile, the Final Fantasy XI came out at closer to the start of 2002. So Final Fantasy is currently about, give or take, 21 year as well. So it's older than World of Warcraft. It's still functioning. Curious.
まだ当時モデム通信の時代だったんで、
Yeah.
PPP 通信とか、あと ADSL がちょうど普及した
Yeah.
始めた時期
There
だった
was a start plenty of road programming for PPOE,
PPPoE とか
PPOP, and for the authentical ADSL. Really, the lowest part of the network that no one could be wise programming for anyone was what I was working on. So Final Fantasy XI was the first time for Square to do an MMO on that scale in Japan. Yeah. And there were many different things for different things. Want to say more? Inda. But for more titles overseas, there was Ultima Online, yep. A different predecessors to the overseas market. Yeah. The Ultima Online, EverQuest, a lot of other games that are starting to incorporate the online connectivity to things. It was really, it was a unique concept back then. A game that's why people are so nostalgic about MMOs, actually, I think, because it was so unique and so unprecedented to have such a world of such a scale to include so many people. And it was just like, person, can I talk to you, person? And it was like, basically, it was such a completely different scene back then. It really was.
基本的に PC ですよね。で、俺らがコンシューマー機でやるなんて、もう無謀の極みだとかってね、もうたく
It
さん
was almost impossible, yeah.
まあ、ソニーさん
As well as was the first PC era when the hard disk, and there were
ハードディスク
so many randoms that they were going on around that. Yeah. Perspective that was impossible to do, so it was quite a challenge.
まあ不可能だとかってよく言われてましたよ、実際に。成功なんて。
You have to admit that it was really hard to do, because if you focus your stuff on the console, because let's be real, console was always more popular in Japan. Nintendo, Sega, everything, it all came from Japan, and they were like super arcadey console players for a long time. Plus, the PC wasn't as developed in terms of like game devs and game implementation as it was right now. Like right now, you can easily find console gaming computers that are much more advanced in their programming than their console counterparts. It's not like it's now it's the consoles playing catch up with the computers. Before that, it was a really cool thing, but it was the computers that were playing catch up with the consoles. So it was a completely different dynamic back then. So it was when they implemented the multiplayer capacity into PC One. It was when the when it was shifted, because for the first time they approached the market that was not inherently created on console, right? The MMOs were inherently created for the PC players, because the PC players had a bigger capacity for internet. Consoles did not have that kind of like addition, so they were basically worked overtime to implement this addition into PC One or Two. I'm not exactly sure which of those, but they worked so hard to implement it, and then they created this game, Final Fantasy XI.
11 was my first MMO. I hadn't played one before. I remember purchasing the PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2, okay.
And unit
Yeah.
because they were all sold out. I ended up paying double on like some Yahoo auction or something like that. Ridiculous. But
Ridiculous.
I had to play it. we got a new internet connection. We were on a regular modem at that time, but because we needed a new modem, we had to upgrade to ISDN 128. But yeah, it was definitely worth it. It was something that was completely new to me, but fascinating. And
It was fascinating.
Been into MMOs. That was the gateway drug for me. Going in from FF11 and then trying some of the Western MMOs.
World of Warcraft,
World of Warcraft, seeing the differences between the two.
Personally, I think it's very different. I mean, here in Japan from the Western market.
Almost definitely.
Yeah, it is for everyone in the globe. I mean, it's very first MMORPG on the console.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. Nobody attempted to make an MMORPG on the console before Square actually stepped up and did the Final Fantasy XI on the console. Nobody really did that. It was a bit of an innovative concept, and a lot of people were skeptical back then, I think, of the concept. I think people were not really that accustomed to like JRPG format as well, because a lot of the games that are currently coming out, the percentage of games that are getting localized on the West right now from Japan is much higher than it was before. If anything, before a certain point, I think there was more of a cliche about the fact that it was going to be fan localization. It was going to suck ass, or it's going to be like a bad localization, because it's not because of like changing the concepts or anything like it is now when the people are censoring and everything, because it was just basically grammatically bad. It wasn't really good as a localization, just purely for quality's sake. So this was new. This was a completely thing. I have not heard about Final Fantasy XI as a game until 2006, I want to say, because me as a person, I'm Russian. We are a bit closer to Asia, a bit closer to Japan. We have a bit more unique relationships with these companies, because they often tend to open localization stuff even earlier, and then it is in the West. Like for example, Lost Ark, Russian servers opened a good year before they opened on the West, and they weren't done by Amazon Games. They were done by a completely different studio here. Though the success of it is kind of like depends. It's still kind of it's still kind of pay to win, and still kind of like stuff. It's not pay to win, but it's still kind of greedy too. That publisher is still a bit greedy. I think Mail.ru Games, something like that, something along those lines. And I've heard about Final Fantasy XI about 2006. But again, I was not really a fan of MMORPGs. Honestly, I wasn't really much of a gamer to begin with. I was not a gamer for a long time. I played very rarely because I didn't. It's not because I hated games, but because I had very little opportunity to play games. Let's say it like that. But yeah, let's continue.
PlayStation 2, and also, I mean, it was the first ever cross-platform MMO.
Cross-platform, yeah.
PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360.
Yeah.
The obvious one is the most Japanese people don't very like to chat in public.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, in the world, there's a lot of characters, but it's very quiet.
It's very quiet.
People are using a tell instead of the say or shout. And
they're very private. They're very like, I'm gonna stick to this little segment of my life. They're very focused on.
But if you want
little groups.
Western world, game world, I mean, every single one is shouting around. So yeah, that's a huge difference.
Huge difference, yeah.
While in the West, you have your EverQuests and you had your Ultima Online.
Yeah, Ultima Online.
In Japan, there was none of that.
None of that.
And then, so Final Fantasy XI was really one of the first MMOs.
If I'm not mistaken,
with basically the pioneers of the Japanese MMO, was really exciting.
If I'm not mistaken, I feel like even the concept of a massive multiplayer game online was something completely unique to the Japan, because they are used to a lot of arcadey stuff. They were used to a lot of single player JRPG situation. I mean, Final Fantasy series was coming out for a while at this point. If I'm not mistaken, the first game came out somewhere in the 70s, give or take. Final Fantasy 1. It came out in the 70s.
I'm back. How far are you?
I am almost 15 minutes in. It's actually much, but I'm actually going much longer, much quicker than before. Because I'm not commenting too much. I'm basically just giving like a bit of commentary. Okay, when did Final Fantasy VI came out? Yep. Okay, no, I was mistaken. It came out in 1987. Okay, so 87. Like closer to 90s.
And I mean, you could also say that it was possibly kind of a curse in the sense that they were all, doing their own thing. They had their vision of what an MMO should be and what a Japanese MMO should be.
Yeah.
And then me, again, not having played an MMO before, getting on this team and thinking, okay, this is an MMO, and translating away and working in that project, I kind of, started thinking, okay, this is what an MMO is, this is what an MMO is. And then that one day I start playing WoW, and it's like, oh, oh.
I think so, yeah, because they were pioneers in the industry, right? They had no idea. Most likely, I think they weren't really even playing the other games. They weren't even like playing other MMOs before. And being a pioneer is both a blessing and a curse.
How much Final Fantasy XIV did you play?
I finished Realm Reborn. I finished Realm Reborn, and I also am aware about everything that happened prior to Realm Reborn, because as I already explained, I was there somewhat. I'm not a 1.0 player. I'm 1.0 watcher. I had a person I sat down and played with, because I was not much of a gamer back then. But I really enjoyed watching this adventure, because it was like a whole story arc of a situation.
Seeing the differences between the two and saying like, okay, what I thought was the norm in Final Fantasy XI,
yeah,
the grinding for
the grinding
20 hours to go up one level, and then only to have your level drop when you pull too many crabs and it kills you and you've lost 5 hours work. I thought that was normal, and then
yeah.
That's not normal, is it?
That's not normal. A lot of these eras of MMOs, they were intrinsically more hardcore. That's why World of Warcraft took the world by the storm, because it took all of the elements people loved about MMO and cut out all the elements people hated about MMOs. Because not every person is a hardcore play gamer. Not every person will sit there and grind for 30 hours just to run into a little chupacabra that murders the fuck out of them, and then they lost everything they spent in the last like 10 hours. And then they need to start again. A lot of people right now especially will just go and they just drop it right immediately. Back then was different, but even back then people were grumbling about it. Largely the mainstream consumer was grumbling about it even back then, when it was like a novelty thing. So Blizzard did the Blizzard thing and basically took an idea and refined it beyond measure, and then released it in a much more casual way. Like, it still was hardcore in its own way, but it was very much ways ahead in casualty from what other MMOs offered.
Wait, World of Warcraft wasn't the first MMO.
It wasn't. The first MMO, if I'm not mistaken, like even Final Fantasy XI came out 2 years before World of Warcraft. There were Ultima Online, there were EverQuest Online, there was like so many MMOs before World of Warcraft even became a thing. Let me actually see, what's the first MMO officially? And I don't know officially what's the first MMO. The first... no. Game. What was the first MMO game? The Realm Online. Okay. While on the list, open the door to mentions. Okay. Oldest MMOs in the world. Okay. Let me see. The oldest MMOs online. There was Realm Online, which came out in 1996. There was Legends of the Future Past.
Oh shit, I had no idea.
There was Legends of the Future Past that came out in 1992. 92. There was Neverwinter Nights from Stormfront Studio, 1991. Yeah. There's been, I think, the oldest one, and Island of Kismai, which is basically the oldest one, I think. Multi-user dungeon. It was the first commercial MMO, which came out in 1985. So, yeah. So the MMO genre, by the time World of Warcraft created, MMO genre was existing for a good 25 years, I'd say. 24, 25, 27 years even, considering if you add 2 years to that. 27 years. It was just really, really niche and really experimental and really unique. And it never really took off in popularity until World of Warcraft came along and ballooned the player numbers. Like, back then, just imagine it for a moment, back then, 5,000 players to 10,000 players was considered really big in terms of MMO. It was considered really fucking big. 10,000 players. That's just imagine how niche a genre must be in an already niche back then thing as gaming. How niche might be that 10,000 players is considered gigantic. Right now it's kind of like rookie numbers, if anything, but then 10,000 players was massive. And then you have the first MMO that came out on the consoles, which was Final Fantasy XI. It came start of 2002. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I just checked it. May 2002, yeah. And it basically was, as I said, basically what brought a lot of the team that worked on the Final Fantasy XIV. They also worked on Final Fantasy XI, and it was kind of a curse in that situation, as Koji was saying, because they thought they knew what an MMO was, but until by that point, the MMO genre completely changed. It was a flash in a pan that was World of Warcraft that completely changed the structure of what we consider to be an MMO and how we consider MMO to be.
Base game, Final Fantasy XI, had already released, and they were working on the first expansion, Rise of the Zilart. I was part of the team that was working to get the base game and Rise of Zilart all translated before the Japanese Rise of Zilart was finished, so we could all release at the same time.
Right. Did you get it on time?
Got it on time.
Got it on time.
I haven't missed a deadline yet. That's one thing I'm proud of.
Proud of you.
Final Fantasy XI was a huge success for Square Enix. It established a concurrent user base of
Yeah.
250,000 players for
Yeah.
years.
For
It was the
years.
most profitable Final Fantasy game ever, and at one stage was the 6th most popular game on all of Xbox Live.
See? Also, to this day, 20, give or take 23 years later, 2002, 2003, 21 years later, Final Fantasy 11 player count. It's still a game that is active, actually. It's currently has, give or take, it's ranked 46 out of 140 tracked MMOs. It's also, after 21 years, has about daily players, give or take 14,000 daily players, and total estimated amount of players about 500,000 million. Final Fantasy XI, still to this day. Even though Final Fantasy XIV is around, even though Final Fantasy XIV is super popular, they still stick to 11 to this day.
More than that, it established the Japanese style of MMO.
Yeah.
When the decision was made in 2005 to start work on a sequel, the new MMO was built around things that made 11 successful, focusing, like most Final Fantasy games do, on beautiful graphics and an interesting battle system. This new game was to be directed and produced by the same duo that shipped 11, series veteran Hiromichi
Tanaka and Nobuaki Komodo. Yeah.
Final Fantasy XIV was announced for Windows and PlayStation 3 in 2009, but behind the scenes the development team was struggling to put the pieces of its new world together.
Yeah.
Time to hop on 11.
Yeah, if you want to, you can check it out. It's a piece of history at this point. It's really a piece of history. Final Fantasy XI was a completely mind-blowing thing that happened in 2002. Again, I already mentioned I heard about it in 2006, but it was really popular. It was really popular where I lived, where I constantly like moved around. It was really popular. It was like one of the most popular Final Fantasy games by that point. And by that point, as you can see, Final Fantasy VII existed, Final Fantasy V existed. All of these Final Fantasy were already out, and Final Fantasy XI became the most popular one for a while. Of course, Final Fantasy XIV came out and sucked ass.
まあ、ファイナルファンタジー14のその最初のバージョン、まあ、自分が見た時の一番大きな問題点、まあ、最終的にそれが問題だったと考えるっていうのはその
The initial concept was the game of designers to write. Yeah. The scripts to create the game. Yeah. Of course, there is an advantage of utilizing scripts and that the game designer can write the script and then execute it quickly. Yeah. You don't have to consult with an engineer to talk about how the game is structured, or you don't have to debate on the different parameters that have to be set to the script if script is used. It's more time efficient. So the majority of the game elements were built upon the usage of scripts that kind of automate the process. Yeah, but the user interface was affected by this as well. When those scripts were running, it uses a lot of CPU resources. Okay. This is extremely high to just run different scripts. Okay. So what happened is, I think, from what I can understand, their method of utilizing scripts basically overloaded the process of the game itself. It was the epitome of non-optimized. I remember watching the first cutscene, and it was basically a slideshow. I always wondered why the fuck was that. Like, even back then, I listened to the Noclip documentary. I really missed that because I didn't really have a lot of knowledge about how these things work. Because I watched this fucking video 5 years ago, first time, when it first came out, right? It's just like, I didn't really know much about how this process works. I didn't really have a lot of the knowledge I have now. So rewatching this now, 5 years later, I'm like, oh, I see. So it was hell. It was code hell. Yeah. Because it's trying to execute these different tricks, and so whatever we tried to do would lead to the slowdown of the servers. And then the load was on those servers was just too heavy. And we could not do anything robust or rich in terms of in-game depiction. Yeah. So MMOs usually are very constrained in terms of the amount of data they can do, right? Because all of these people run around the servers, all of this stuff. That's why all of the MMO graphics usually cannot be made hyper realistic. It's like super non-realistic at this point, right? Because the world is constantly online. There's servers, there's strain on the servers. The game is run on the servers. You're constantly uploading yourself to the server. Every single person uploads themselves to the server. They are moving around things. They're fighting. All the things happening at the same time. So there is a certain amount of server capacity. By utilizing those scripts to automate the process and not doing everything manually and everything and doing it efficiently, by automating everything, they basically overloaded the servers with those scripts, and the overloading parts of the scripts of the server, they slowed down the gaming processes to a crawl because there's not much space on those servers left for you to do anything else, really. Anything else. Yeah. Yeah, but it's hard.
Before, again, localization being in a position where we get to see all the parts come together first.
Yeah.
We were some of the first to realize that.
Oh shit.
We have a problem.
Yeah. Oh shit.
That type of situation. I mean, you had the battle team. They're like,
yeah.
Yes, we have this great battle system with stamina and these things that you can do. And then you had the story team. Yes, we have this story. Oh, hey, we have these guild leads and all of these parts, and everyone was really, really proud of it.
But
Look at this grass, it's so beautiful. Look at this barrel, it's the most beautiful barrel ever to be, represented in graphical form.
It's got as many polygons as the character.
Yes. And all of those parts, all of these teams, again, very, very proud of their work.
Yeah.
I mean, the team was, put together with some of the best minds
Yeah.
in Square Enix. You
Yeah.
had people that were, leads that could probably even, lead their own projects were all
yeah.
come together, and it became a lot of just tiny little groups making something that was really great. But once you put it together, it was kind of a mess.
Yeah, that's basically
Which Final Fantasies did you play?
I've played I played Final Fantasy VII, I played Final Fantasy X, I played 14, and I played 15. Yeah, those are the games that I played. Yeah, 5, 7, 10, and 14. 14 and 15. Those are the games I played. Very passively, some of them. Very passively. One day I wish to sit down and play all the games in the series on stream. I'll play all of them. Like one day, once I free myself from the reign of all the gachas I currently have and catch up to the stories, I'll have much more free time to do whatever else. So I'm going to be doing a lot of those experimental series, a lot of the JRPGs I always wanted to play, all of the older games I always wanted to play that has the legendary status that I never really had the chance to catch up with. Right? I'm going to be doing that.
Nice, same. I plan on playing Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, it's like, okay, think about this. Think what he's saying here. The depressing part is that the development team was really fucking good. They all were really good. They all were really best developers in the field on that side, on the side of Japan, Square Enix. But what happened is there was complete lack of communication and destabilized leadership. There was no good leadership that was like one guy that has a vision and he basically makes sure that every part of the game fits into that vision. You had very separate leads that created really good shit, but that really good shit did not fit together at all. So you have absolute chaos of a code that is overloaded with scripts. You have all these fun concepts that were created basically in isolation from each other and shoved together to work, shoved together and like basically patched together with a stapler, right? Because otherwise it just does not function. And it's just so utterly overwhelming.
And no one really knew that, except for localization and probably QA as well. And we're like, okay,
QA.
we need to do something. But by then it was one of those, it's
Too late.
kind of too late. To
It's
do
too late.
anything. But for us, we'd be looking at the text, and some of it, it wouldn't make sense, or it would just be very bland. And thinking, if there's any way to make this game better, what can we do? It's like, well, I can take this text and maybe add some more stuff into it, add some more flavor to it, and maybe that will distract people from the fact that the battle is not that fun.
At a fundamental level, the piecemeal design of the game was causing problems.
Oh.
Graphics were inconsistent. While many elements of the world were copy and pasted ad nauseum, some environmental objects had as many polygons and shaders as a character model.
Yeah. See, that's what I mean. That's what I mean about the dysfunctional, decentralized development. No leadership leads to that. Absolutely that. They were still passionate. They were still really wanted to do things. They really still wanted to make this succeed. But
the battle system was just confusing. The game didn't have
Yep.
elements fundamental to most modern MMOs. Things like jumping, auto attack, and the ability to interact with
It was-
the map using
yes, right. I don't know how to attack. You know the normal thing you do when you are MMO and you just basically cast a thing with like a ball of light. You gotta make your caster. You just cast a ball of light periodically, and then you add to this the spells that are like the lightning bolts, the fireball, and everything. But they're like the most like the full ball of light. No, there was none of that. I remember watching the game, and it was basically just like a dude standing there, and then cast an ability, and then just standing there. and then casting an ability and standing there. It was just like it was. You could basically just leave it be in the background most of the time, because it was like a turn your brain off and don't do anything clicker situation. It wasn't fun to play, like whatever it's whatsoever. It wasn't dynamic. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form engaging. It was just confusing, really.
Mouse. It had a system that nerfed hardcore players to make sure they didn't level up too fast. UI was confusing. Crafting was incredibly complex.
So grinding was not even possible because of the stamina system that they implemented. Yes, they had a mobile game system in MMO. They had a mobile. This was a fakey fucking mobile game MMO, where you have stamina for how long you can grind and how long you can level up. It was rough. It was really fucking rough.
And took forever. And simply, there just wasn't enough content.
Yeah.
Closed beta wasn't going well.
The thing about the stamina system, they implemented the stamina system to make sure that the players did not progress too fast, because there was not real content to progress to in the end. It was just basically such chaotic mess that they spent most of the time development actually fixing problems instead of actually developing things.
They needed more time to fix these problems, so the open beta was pushed back to within a month before launch.
Yeah.
The team knew there were problems, and they were getting frustrated.
Yep.
まあ今まで話していた
Where are my microtransactions?
Microtransactions weren't exactly a thing back then in the Japanese stuff, but yeah, it basically was. It wasn't even pay to win. You couldn't pay for stamina. It was basically completely gating you from progressing the game entirely. You could not do anything about it, because the developers knew that the problems were super deep and the game was a fucking burning train wreck. So they implemented a system that could not be subverted in any capacity. So you basically had to rely on just playing a little bit, then just doing whatever else, and then trying to cheese the battle system with like samey spells and like overpowered imbalanced bullshit. Some people stayed around for the company they made. I think a lot of people stayed around back then because they made a lot of friends in this niche game that everyone hated.
っていうのは大体その2010年の1月から、
Yeah.
まあ、実際にリリースされる 8月ぐらいまで
Yeah.
の間にやっていたことで、で、まあ、ゲームが本当に良くないっていうのがこう、まあ、みんなに
Was it done this with the game? It was almost when the beta started, and then September, October turning. Yep.
まあ8月9月10月
Started to notice that they were having a problem here. Yeah. See what I mean? That's the same thing that happened to Anthem in a way. Because in Anthem, there was also no centralized leadership that actually knew what they were doing. They were all trying to do different things. They were trying to put their fullest into the project. But ultimately, it was bland and completely broken. It was pretty. It was like it was pretty. But it was ultimately baked wrong, right? And that's why a lot of but it was a Western game. Ultimately, it was a Western game where the company would not really take a risk to resurrect the brand. It was a new brand. Nobody gives a shit, right? If it dies, whatever. But completely different level of dedication to a brand on the Western side. That's why Anthem was never really destined to have a rebirth similar to Final Fantasy XIV, because it was a completely different level of dedication to things. But it was much worse than Anthem. Final Fantasy XIV was much worse than Anthem ever was. Even with decentralized everything, even with lack of content, it was much worse because it was not working the way it was supposed to work. It was not working on a fundamental level. On all the fundamental levels, it was not working.
なんですね。で、実際にはこうチーム内の意識としても
And the team noticed that the game was going wrong much too later. Too late.
リリース前、そのベータが始まる前から本当に
When it is quality for release to the world, yeah.
いいものかどうかっていう議
Of
論
course,
があ
not
るんですけど
officially, but amongst developers, there were.
全体でそのオフィシャルであったわけではないですけれども、開発者の中ではやはりその
Taking notice of it a bit, debate about it. Yeah, they were taking notice. Yeah, starting to take notes after actually.
1.0 was getting made. Was the mentality that, oh, we're not like, that's like their thing, and we have our very own successful thing over here. We're going to just make another one of those.
Right.
Yep.
That's really what it felt like, is that we're going to continue doing what we did because it succeeded before. Why wouldn't it succeed again?
See, that's the mentality. I think that's the mentality that gets a lot of games shut down these days too. It succeeded before, so why should it not succeed now? Because the game industry, I think more than anywhere, any time in the world, it's actually like completely spiraling out of control. It's growing on rates that I don't think ever seen before. It's like one of the youngest. Well, gaming is like one of the youngest sphere of entertainment, but it's still growing on a pace that is unprecedented, and it became one of the mainstream enjoyment of things very very quickly, actually. And a lot of developers who did something successful, they don't realize that doing just that, again, it might not work now. So you have to kind of innovate. You have to kind of adapt to the trends of the current stage. Like it or not, you have to play other games. You have to play other games to find what inspires you. You need to take ideas from other games and make them your own. You need to make sure to implement all these things, especially in a genre as MMO. But they didn't do that. More and even more so, they had this completely decentralized leadership position that didn't do that either.
And seeing that direction, them taking that direction, and knowing that, having worked on 11, that yes, they were very successful.
Yeah, very successful.
The success that they had with Final Fantasy 11, seeing these great creators, creating something that was, revolutionary.
Yeah. But it was not.
On the other hand, knowing that what they were doing was, but maybe that worked 6 or 7 years ago, but a lot of things have changed since then.
Yeah.
And I think there was even one guy on the localization team that got to that point where he just got so frustrated that he just wrote this scathing mail and sent it out to the whole team before telling anyone else on localization he was going to write it. And then we all get it at the same time, the devs team. We're reading, it's like, wow, this is really terrible. I hope he doesn't, he sent it to the whole team. Because he just got really frustrated because he could, to him, they were being very stubborn. They weren't, they hadn't moved on. Whereas the rest of the world had moved on and adapted, with the release of WoW and what they had done. Whereas, the team here was like, no, we're going to stick with what we know, and that's good enough.
Sometimes it is good enough, but a lot of the time people are not. People are both very resistant to change, but also they don't realize how much they want to change. Sometimes it's like when you are. It's like basically stuck in the same terrible job. Like you're used to it. You want a different job, but then you have the opportunity to get a different job, and then you're afraid of it. It's kind of like a weird psychological paradox. We're just like, I want better, but when it better comes, but what if it's not better, right? It's just like it's ping-ponging back and forth. And same thing happened here. A lot of people don't realize how much they needed those changes, right? Now people scream about how it was better back in Classic. But people some people who played Classic then screamed about how better it was in other MMOs who are much more hardcore. They're like, I don't want to play this casual bullshit. And then people, I don't want to play this casual bullshit about saying, back in Classic it was so hardcore. But then it wasn't hardcore compared to what was hardcore back then. It is just... It's a constant cycle of, it was better before, it's worse now, but then new people come in, and then when completely different change occurs and a completely different stuff, it was better before, but now it's worse. It was different people saying, different people coming into gaming saying different things about how it was before. Like for me, what was before, what was in 1997 when it was Ultima Online and shit like that, that was what went before, and it was and World of Warcraft even in 2004 was absolutely casual compared to what it was in 1999 or something like that. It was absolutely casual, but people still say that the classic hardcore was so hardcore. It wasn't. It really wasn't compared to. It really wasn't.
Start feeling more concerning the situation. This is not fixed.
Not fixed.
You announced the launch date, but it's not fixed. So, but still, some major portion of people are still thinking, believing, no, it's better, still better.
Copy him.
So
Copy him.
I mean, fixed or change that multi-type.
See, that's what happened as well because of this decentralized development and because of lack of strong leadership. They were not aware that the problems were running so deep that just fixing it before the game starts is not possible. It's just physically not possible.
Kind of went from thinking, okay, this project's going to be great, to, uh-oh, there might be some problems. Can we fix them? Can we fix them? Okay, we can't fix them. Is there anything we can do? I don't know. It was a very taxing experience.
Imagine though, you know a project. I think it's similar to it's similar to what happened with No Man's Sky in a way, from what I remember. Imagine you're sitting there and you know the product is not going to be good, and you know it's like almost you're almost sitting on the train on the rails of a train, and you see a train approaching for high speed, and you can't do anything about it. Or like not even like sitting on the rails. You're sitting on the sideways of the rail, and you see like your creation, something you care deeply about. It is like sitting right on the rails. It's like tied to it so high. You don't have the time to approach it and like take it away from there, so it is not hit by a approaching train. You do not have the time to do it, so you just helplessly sit there and watch as the thing is like as a train is approaching massive speed. You can't do anything about it anymore. The time where you could do anything about it, you just didn't notice it was there. The train.
The team crossed their fingers and hoped that the game's beta problems were simply that, the same issues that most MMOs have, ones that could be fixed with patches once the game entered live operations. And so Final
Unfortunately
Fantasy
not.
XIV Online launched on September 30th, 2010. It sold well its first week, and after a month had over 600,000 players swarming into its world.
Yeah,
But
it was
didn't take long
massive.
for the cracks to appear. The problems in the beta were echoed by new players. The game was sluggish, the servers crashed, and Eorzeans quickly ran out of things to do. Quests were limited, and the fatigue system even made grinding for
fatigue.
XP next to impossible.
Yeah.
Critics hated
See what I
it
mean?
too.
See what I mean? See what I mean though? See what I mean? See what I mean? Exactly what I mean when it comes to the game system, the battle system. See what happens? Stand. Let me fucking out.
Let's get
Were echoed by new
Let me
players.
see.
The game was
Flip.
sluggish, the servers crashed.
You're running around, yeah.
Eorzeans quickly
The fight.
ran
See
out
the
of
battle.
things to do. Quests were
See what the battle. There is no casting while this casting just happens,
limited,
right?
and the
Casting,
fatigue
sure.
system even made grinding for XP
Yeah, see what happens? Usually when there's a normal game, there will be some filler damage dealt here, like the normal stab or the normal throwing of the uncertain magical ball of bullshit that you just throw in, or like a musical note, or like an arrow, how it's like with the bards right now, arrow, or something to fill in the air, something to make the combat more dynamic. Note how there's none of that here. See what I mean? You just basically click on the enemies and you stand there awkwardly waiting for your cooldowns to reset. It didn't show particularly, but you just stand there awkwardly and wait for your cooldowns to reset before you can do that, and then stand awkwardly and wait until the
things to do. Quests were limited,
and until the bar fills in.
even made grinding for XP next to
See?
impossible. Critics say
It's so how do I say it? It was so unintuitive and weird and absolutely uninspiring.
little life too.
Let's get right down to it. Unless you've got the patience of Job or some
Yeah.
kind of masochist, you shouldn't play Final Fantasy XIV. Its problems are so vast that I could spend hours talking about them.
Yeah, look at
The
this.
awful interface, the recycled content, the
Yeah.
stringent limits on questing, the useless maps, the stupid market ward. These issues and dozens more constantly have you asking that age-old question, what were they thinking?
Does it look inspiring to you guys? Like, well, if you look at it, it doesn't look in any way, shape, or form inspiring to you as players. I don't think it does. I don't think it does to this day. It's really not in any capacity something that is like it's not something you would want to play in a weird way. You know what I mean? Not in a weird way. It's not something you would want to play effectively. A lot of people didn't. That's the thing. A lot of people didn't want to play this. And they didn't play it.
So, what was it like seeing public reaction?
Yeah, it was very, very disheartening, because you'd want to look at those and you'd want to say, no, they don't understand. They don't know, what's going on here, but deep down, you'd know they were right.
Yeah.
And that was what kind of, that dagger in your heart and it's twisting, because, you want to defend what you worked on. I mean, the people that I worked with are the greatest people. I still, work with a lot of them. I had worked with them before. With 11, I consider them not only coworkers but friends. But and then you see people online, bashing the work they did, and I know how hard they worked. I know how many hours they put in. I know that, like, in the last 3 or 4 months, people were
living at work.
At work.
Yeah.
All putting their 100% into this game that was, destined to kind of crash and burn.
That's just so sad, honestly. It is. You cannot realize just how fucking sad that is. To put a 100 and everything into something or someone or some place or something, and they just realize that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you want to defend it, it's just not going to work out. It's just going to burn, and nothing will stop the burning.
And then to have people online just say, oh, that sucks, this person is a piece of shit, their work is terrible. It hurts, but it hurts more because if I was not here and was a user and had played that game, I probably would have said the same thing.
Yep.
そうですね。当時もね、私CFO やってたんで見てるんですけども、ローンチのタイミングやっぱ一番大きく違ったのは、いろいろごたごたね。
Versus the original Final 1.0 was the 1.0 Final Fantasy 14. That was, despite all the issues that were happening in Final Fantasy 11, the game was still fairly received well. Yeah, fairly well received. But of course, there were some operational issues surrounding. Of course. Final 14, and it was kind of expected for those problems to happen. Yeah, but the game content itself was doing well received, and people were accepting, and they thought it was okay. But Final Fantasy 14, the 1.0 version of it, yeah, what I felt was problematic was that the game itself was not regarded very well. Yeah. It was actually received very poorly at the end after launch, and I really felt that sort of reaction. So you're not too far from the launch of the old Final Fantasy 14. Yeah. We were worried and concerned within the company about can we continue doing this? Yeah, I think part of the reason why what happened from the people's reaction is that Final Fantasy XI was understandably the first console game MMO. First cross-platform, first console game MMO. If I'm not mistaken, at least if they're telling the truth here, because they did say that, it was the first one. And it being the first one, it automatically meant that there will be problems that will be happening from the all the running of the servers, running of the hardwares, all of the bugs and everything that need to be ironed out, and they were ironed out. Even back then, there were situations where you could iron out some issues and download new patches and everything. But the game itself was good, right? There was solid leadership there. People pulled together. People made game systems that function together well. In this situation, it's a completely different beast because the game does not function the way it's supposed to. It's a Frankenstein monster of concepts and ideas, of high graphical assets and low graphical assets, of interesting deep lore and weird goofy lore. And it's just like people, it didn't really make sense in some situations. There were so many exposition dumps you could basically die before you listen to all of them. They were their characters were still somewhat the same. They were the Y'shtola. They were Y'shtola. Is the Y'shtola? For some reason, I watched too much. I watched too much Asmongold. I call her Y'shtola now for some reason. And it's just like there was still the similar characters, right? That were introduced in the Realm Reborn, but the writing was just subpar compared to what it is now. It didn't have that much flair to it on Japanese side of things, if I remember correctly. Just everything felt so disconnected from each other. If that makes sense, it felt so disconnected and completely nonsensical. If I'm gonna be honest.
I mean, the first few months was just an endless stream of translating apologies,
Yes.
mails from
There was so many apologies.
directors and
We're sorry. We're so sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry.
Figure out different ways of saying we're sorry, because the more you say it, the less weight it has. But Japan being a country where people apologize a lot, that's part of the culture.
Yep.
But then trying to translate that, it's like, okay, this is the 10th time I've said sorry in this one post, and from the American myself, like, yeah, people are going to look at that as insincere. The more you apologize, the more and then trying to explain that to the team, it's like, no, we have to apologize. It's like, yes, you have to apologize, but
Yeah, that's the thing. When it comes to Japanese, gomenasai, 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 gomenasai. It's just like a lot of even like casual scenarios, they can apologize like a million times for something. It's just like it's not. It doesn't work like that. That the more you apologize, the less sincere you sound. It's a cultural thing that apology needs to be full, and like you need to fully express how you feel about this in like the most polite way possible, kind of thing. That's why a lot of the language of these apologies probably didn't translate well, because it's basically everyone saying we honestly apologize. We apologize so hard. We apologize really well, really much. Hontoni gomenasai. Hontoni gomenasai. It's just like we're so sorry. We're sorry. It's like then you compare it to the clip of South Park. It's like you're sorry. Sorry, we're sorry. It's like it is portrayed as this symbol of complete insincerity when they apologize over and over and over and over and over again, right? It's just like, and then later what happened like on Twitter with like DiGiorno, I think I watched like internet historian video. Again, it was taken as a sign of insincerity as well, but it's a completely different scale of things on the Japanese side of things, because they are. They do apologize like that, and it's completely sincere. Try to explain that to the average Western consumer, though.
It just became, we weren't talking about the game anymore. We were talking about how to translate apologies, and it seemed like that lasted for a couple months.
That's why we see a huge drop. I mean, right after the launch timing, we got some good number of the subscribers. And then that fall. I mean, as you can imagine. So, I mean, it was.
People were excited about the game. People were really excited about the new MMO in the genre, I imagine, because a lot of people who wanted to play 14 probably played 11. I think a lot of people who stuck with 14, they played 11, because 11 was much worse in terms of like grind and shit. But normal people who dropped by and it's Final Fantasy, oh, MMO Final Fantasy, they dropped by, and then they dropped out immediately after. Some of them canceled the subscription, so some others let the subscriptions run out. But immediately in the following weeks, if I remember correctly, of the start of the game, there was so much trouble and issues with players, because there was not a lot of players, really, not a lot of them. Like by the end of the cycle, there were like thousands of players. There were like not hundreds of thousands, it was thousands of players by the end of the life cycle of the 1.0, I think. Maybe tens of thousands. I'm not particularly sure about the specifics, but it wasn't really impressive. It wasn't really that much of an impressive number. Though the free weekend, the free week of the conclusion, the big finale will be mentioned here. It was basically a huge boom of population because it was such a big event.
It was failure. We announced a failure, so we see lots of decline.
super sharp decline. Mentioned earlier, and developers were already said sort of skeptical even at the beta. Yeah, even pre-release phase. There were feelings that this game was very premature. Oh yeah, it was underbaked. Should have been released to the world. It shouldn't be released to the world at this stage. But before the launch, there was sort of a broad feeling that maybe it was resolve itself. Ah, good old copium. Maybe once it's sludged, maybe. Sort of glimpse of hope. We had nothing to back up this feeling. Yeah. But we're hoping that it will be all work out well once we launch the title. But the magic didn't happen. Once released, our fears did come true. It was not ready to be released to the world. I think everybody had that worry in their mind, somewhere in the back of their head, yeah. And so it wasn't difficult for everybody to realize that there was some kind of fundamental issue that we need to resolve. So it wasn't difficult to convince the other team members that we were running into an issue here. Yeah, I think at some point it would be too late. If they waited too long, it would be too late.
Today, Square Enix is based across multiple floors in a modern office complex in
Yeah.
Shinjuku, Tokyo.
Yeah.
It's a company that is often designing multiple projects at once.
Mhm.
And while Final Fantasy XIV was being developed, in another part of the building, a different game was being made. Produced by a Final Fantasy fan. His name?
Naoki Yoshida. The computer American system, I believe it's called Nintendo Entertainment System. Oh yeah. Mario Brothers was the first game I played. But now, as a child, I always saw that he is something that you look at. Yeah. When I first got my chance to play with Mario Brothers and got to hold that control in my hand, I wish I was actually playing this at my friend's house. But being able to move something that's on the TV screen using a controller, it was just shocking to me. It's such an interesting thing, but it really is that people who play games now, they just take it as a granted. Like, oh, I can play this on my iPad. I can move it around. I can like tap on my iPad. It's just like it's normal, right? It's like, oh, you use this. It's so weird and so strange. But back then, like, he's much older than me. Like, let's be real. Yoshida here, 5 years ago, he was, how long he was? How old he was back then? How old he is now, Naoki Yoshida? I hope I can at least know how Naoki Yoshida is old. Yoshida-san is age. How old is he? He's 50 years old. He's 50. Back then he was, since this video is 6 years ago, he was 44, 45, 44, something along those lines. Yeah, 2017. Yeah, he was around 40, 44, 45 years of age. So back then, and it was like he was 30 basically when it hit. He was basically approaching his 30s when he was hit. When it hit the new millennia, he was like already decently old by the time the new millennia came around. So he was born in the 70s, give or take. So in the 70s, when I was a kid, gaming industry was not really a thing. It really wasn't. Not as much. At least home system gaming, like TVs. There was arcades, there were anything, but there was not really home gaming consoles focus. It was like so fresh and new. So imagine being a kid back then who is used to the fact that a TV is basically just a TV, something you watch, and then suddenly someone gives you a joystick, and then you move the joystick, and the thing on the TV moves. That probably would be like a world-shattering thing for a kid, wouldn't it? Of course, very impactful video game was Dragon Quest. Yeah, Dragon Quest. One of the titles that spread the whole RPG gaming in Japan. Yeah, RPGs. I should know the back and forth and numbers. But it was very story driven. Dragon Quest, yeah, was very impactful for me as well. Dragon Quest was one of the biggest early JRPGs, if I'm not mistaken. Final Fantasy, yeah. Yeah, Dragon Quest. Yeah. After Dragon Quest took a more cinematic movie like approach to depicting these pictures. So those two games, Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, are definitely a foundation. Very memorable games for me.
Like
Yeah.
most Japanese players at the time, Yoshida-san played all the early Final Fantasy games. He holds them in high regard, though he still holds the bitter memory of not being able to save before the last dungeon in Final Fantasy III.
Yeah, I think a lot of the gaming industry memes, a lot of the gaming industry standards were set in those times. When it comes to JRPGs, a lot of JRPGs cliches were basically set by these things: the Dragon Quests, your Dragon Quest, your Final Fantasies, your everything. All of the big epic fantasies sometimes mixed with like uber technology and magical technology things. All of these quirks were established by these running franchises, and a lot of the other JRPGs that came from there, that's why you can see a lot of the Japanese JRPGs are either fantastical other worlds with unique creatures and everything, or they are urban, like mecha battles and everything, the urban, the aliens and all that stuff. Persona and Shin Megami Tensei is also something that basically set a lot of the quirks in the minds of the Japanese consumers and players. All of those series were basically foundations of what we now consider to be JRPG, and how they are produced in a way. It's actually kind of fascinating to look at the old games and see how they correlate to the new games in the series. And they do borrow other ideas. They do borrow various concepts and shit from each other, because that's how the healthy game developments must be. But ultimately, the basics are the fundamentals. They are retained to a certain degree.
But when he was 11 years old, a brand new type of gaming experience arrived at home. His uncle gave him a PC. On this PC, the young gamer learned how to program BASIC. His first video game centered around trying to break into a bank vault. But this PC also exposed him to a spectrum of gaming that eluded most Japanese players. Western role-playing games. He fell in love with games like Diablo. He was stunned when he first went online and played with other players.
Ultima Online, yeah. Surprisingly, Ultima Online was one of the biggest ones back then, yeah. So I joined the beta, and so that would have been my first MMO game. And I was under shock. Like 300,000 people continuously playing on the same game. Yeah, it was like a big world. Imagine a whole 3,000 players going in the same world. A whole 3,000 players. Imagine now when 3,000 players is at best one server now. Like on a densely populated MMO, it's barely one server, and even then it's considered a low populated server. 3,000. Even Final Fantasy 11 right now, it has more players after 21 years than 3,000. It has like concurrent every day playing people. Concurrently like 1.5 million, right? 3,000, it wasn't 3,000 daily players, it was 3,000, just 3,000 of subscribers, of downloaders, and just 3,000. So you'd see barely like 20 people around, 20 people around, if that. It was really innovative concept, but it was such a niche thing that not a lot of people even were even aware that it existed, which is kind of curious, isn't it? And people who were aware that it existed, they didn't really want to play this, because often more than not, it had this hardcore mentality about it. Like, you need to lose progress, you need to lose items, you need to like work hard for you to retain your the things you did, the PvPs and everything. It was just a bit overwhelming. But it was a world. It was a world. Yeah, you could do everything. Players with the title of Lord. Yeah, very gentleman like. And some community to that type. Plus, I created a separate, completely evil character. Yeah. And just killed everyone. Yeah. So through Ultima Online, I was able to sort of study what kind of like engineering is required for an MMO type game. Yep. It's surprisingly lots of things goes into it. Surprisingly lots. Eversoul? No, what's Eversoul? What's it called? EverQuest, I think. Is that Ultima or EverQuest? Playing games for PC that much on console. And so I also looked into some of FPS games and then 3D MMOs. Yeah, EverQuest. Yeah, it was EverQuest. Okay, I knew I recognized it was. So in the package of EverQuest in Japan. So I would travel to Tokyo on a business trip, and I would go to Akihabara and I would search like somebody trying to find it. They didn't have EverQuest, really. It was a rare game. It was EverQuest. A lot of the games, a lot of the Western games, you never really think about it, but all of the Western games that we have right now and had back then, they were just as not ported to. They were just as equally not ported to the East as the JRPGs were not ported to the West. It was very separated era back then in a way, where a lot of the games like EverQuest, you could basically go through 50 stores and find like several copies of the game EverQuest. So a lot of people, Japanese people, played their own games. They played their own experiences. They were engaged in their own stuff. And Western players, the American players, the European players, they played the completely different experience. It's now that you start to see mingling between a lot of it's like later down the line you see mingling between servers, mingling between stuff, and you create new characters on new servers and Japanese servers and everything. Back then it was not a thing.
Yo, hi, Chief.
Hey, Bami. I'm just discussing MMO stuff. It's like we're listening to Yoshida's story about how he got EverQuest after going through like 60 stores and not getting anything. It's just like, and I'm like really wondering that people don't notice that back then when he played EverQuest, it was such a hard time in Japan to find Western game, just as much of a hard time just as much as it was a hard time finding Japanese game in America. It's kind of funny.
Yoshida-san would embark on a career of games that would eventually see him
Dragon Quest.
Enix to work on the
Dragon Quest series, yeah.
Though he wasn't working on the Final Fantasy team, he was part of the umbrella group that was allocating programmers to various projects.
Yeah.
He didn't have granular visibility on FF14, but he knew the team was struggling.
You probably
his perspective as a producer, where he thought the game's problems were coming from.
I think he probably heard a lot from the from like smoke breaks or anything, or lunch breaks. People talk in corporate environment when they sit down on lunch breaks and like talk. They talk about their problems. They often whine about stuff. They often like complain. It's not unusual to do that. So I think he had a good grasp of both playing the game and interacting with the staff that works on the game. That the game had really been completely mismanaged to hell and back. I know he sort of understood that. What has been sort of been developed by company-wide. All of the talent programs were pulled from. Okay. All different projects and different lines. So many different treasures are missing. Yeah. Our lead programmers, our main programmers. Yeah. That's also really did contribute to it. I was not aware of that actually. The fact that they were producing the Crystal Tools engine right alongside producing other games, and they pulled all of their important project leaders when it comes to programming to that Crystal Tools instead of having them work on mainline titles like Final Fantasy XIV, Dragon Quest, etc., etc. That sounds depressing, even more depressing considering things. It's failure with that as well. And then two large points that were involved in the sort of problem. Yeah. One of the problems for Square from us that was because Square Enix and PlayStation had produced games that were revolutionary with very high graphic qualities. And the quality game experience is also that it was regarded as perhaps on top of the line. of the world. That the corporation itself became very arrogant. Yeah. That's the thing. That's why they pulled the developers. That's why they completely had this destabilized leadership, because of the arrogance. We cannot fail. We're too big to fail. This is going to work. Same mentality a lot of current developers actually have. A lot of current big developers actually have. Blizzard, we're too big to fail. EA, we're too big to fail. It's just like all this we're too big to fail mentalities. One way or another, once a real big train wreck hits, they will understand that they are not. Just like Blizzard understood that they are not, as they were bought by Microsoft. Just like everyone else understood that they are not, as they lost invested and everything. The problem is, instead of changing their ways and adapting to a situation, they stayed the same.
How far are you now?
40 minutes. Are you just going to come in, ask how long I watched the video, and then just fuck off? It's an interesting. I'm rambling about the video here. It's a little surprising that people do that. Okay. Sure.
Yes.
Sure. God. Based. Based. Okay. Well, I'm 40 minutes in almost. 35. But yeah, I'm progressing much faster. But yeah, fuck my thought. My train of thought is completely derailed. What was I saying? Anyway. But yeah, okay, I remember. Thank you. That arrogance led to the complacency, and led to the we're just gonna develop. We can just pull all of our best engineers from the project and just develop our shit. Just develop Crystal Toast. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. The game is gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. But it was not, in fact, fine. It was not, in fact, fine.
I'm a check again in 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay. Feel free to. I was saying, I think the one message got missed. Didn't know.
No Titson?
Didn't know Titson. Didn't notice that it's already been this long. I think it's. I think they meant notice. Didn't notice. Accomplished this quality. Feel that it was extremely large success that become a sort of shackle. Yeah.
Sorry, autocorrect.
No, I figured. I think I've become very arrogant, very prideful, and again, pride leads to complacency. When you succeed in everything you do, eventually you think you're just too hot. You're hot shit. That's basically it. If I'm gonna succeed in everything I'm gonna be doing, eventually,
happens all the time.
Eventually, I'm going to be sitting here and be like, I'm too good. I just don't need to work too hard because I'm so good. I'm gonna be doing well anyway, right? It's like eventually, at some point, if there's a level, I mean, look at XQC, right? What he's doing. He no longer needs to do anything really. He just basically sits there and doesn't even play games anymore. It's just like reacts silently to videos, and he's still one of the biggest Twitch influencers in the scene. He's like, because people just find amusing watching the train wreck that is here. He put much more effort into his own production back then. He still was, but he was at least playing games. He was a really good player, actually, really good player. He did a lot of other things, but yeah, and it's kind of sad how pride eventually that builds up does not allow you to move past your own limits continuously, because eventually you just come to a realization.
Well, I feel like I learned a little bit today.
That's nice, thank you. But yeah, it's just like the complacency is always going to be the enemy of progress. It really will be. Same thing happened here. The impressive bit is that even after all this train wreck, all this bullshit, they actually did find it in themselves to turn it around. That is the important part. They risked it for the biscuit. Back then we had swordsmiths, artisans that make katanas. Yeah. It's a good analogy. We compared them to swordsmiths creating katanas one by hand. And they would create world-class quality. But meanwhile, the world is developing technology so that they can cover that sort of tedious manual labor through technology. And so going back to the gaming industry, once PlayStation 3 came out, technology finally had caught up, and you were able to cover those tedious tasks through technology. But Square Enix did not change our old methods of creating assets. And then we didn't have the resources to catch up on the technology to cover for that as well. And then the programs we knew that we had an issue, technology-wise, were wrapped in creating middleware. Of course, the artists are that sort of artistic mindset, thinking that, oh, I made the world's best graphics. Yeah. And so it was a very laborious and time-consuming way of creating our assets. I believe that is one of the large problems we had in terms of the original 1.0. To add to that, I think not even that, there were the two different approaches within the 1.0, if I remember correctly, watching the gameplay and just seeing the world. I feel like they tried to implement the tactic of handcrafting a lot of the assets. Hence, you have the barrels that have the same amount of polygons and shaders as a player character. Then you have the plants that basically stagger your entire computer the moment you walk past them because of just how detailed they are. But then they realize they're running out of time to make those assets. They just don't have enough time. And the approach completely flipped from trying to handcraft it to taking those handcrafted things and then copy pasting those things all over the place. So you have an extremely high polygon tree that is the same tree over and 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 over, because they didn't have the time to populate an entire world that is traversed with good assets. They had the best assets, they had the single best asset that they placed, but they had to copy paste and spread around, so it became stale and weird in terms of graphical. So, but it's considering they copy pasted the same overloaded asset over and over and over. That overloaded the poor servers even more, causing more stuttering, more slowdown issues, more connectivity issues, and it left less and less space to do anything with content, anything with actual meaningful quality to it. It was just a train wreck overall, and people just never noticed that before because artists were doing their own thing, programmers were doing their own thing. Scriptwriters were doing their own thing. And there was no one guy sitting there and going, wait, no. Can we just do this thing together here? And we just produce these things for these art assets for this game instead of producing art assets or producing game mechanics or producing anything that everyone else will have to sit down and try to turn into a Frankenstein monster that doesn't even utilize stitches. It utilized more like staplers that were easily breakable. Yes, of course, pride is very important, but of great pride, they started thinking that because they are great, they don't need to look at other games. Exactly. So, say for example with MMORPG, if you know, ask anyone who knows MMORPGs, what is the most well-known MMORPG that you know? If you ask 100 people, I'm sure 100 people will say World of Warcraft, yeah. World of Warcraft. But did the same staff members play Warcraft? No. None of the people played. Okay, that's a problem. So I gave the experience of World of Warcraft not because I wanted to talk about the number or not. Developers knew the World of Warcraft or not. But I just wanted to point out that we need to look at what would be our rival and what users are experiencing. in terms of latest gameplay experiences. Yes. And I felt it was very unbelievable that no one was doing the research for titles outside of your own, because you won't know where you are useless, where you are unless you look at other games. Yeah. Even with online games. Yeah. Thing about Final Fantasy XI is that there was no contemporary titles similar to Final Fantasy XI. Not on Japanese side of things, anyway. I don't think it was for a while, at least. There was no other game that approached quite the levels of Final Fantasy XI. What World of Warcraft did is that they looked at every other game available on the market back then. Every other MMO available, the Star Wars game, the Ultima Online, the EverQuest 2, the RuneScape, the everything. They took what made those games good in their side of things. And then they, effectively dumbed it down somewhat from the overcomplicated mess that was sometimes MMORPG game. It was an overcomplicated mess. Everyone knows. Everyone who plays old MMOs, they know that. You had to sit here like a researcher and like basically connect stuff from the wikis and from the game manuals. You needed to like had several books and several tabs open just to understand what the fuck is happening, right? And you didn't. There was a lot of things that were just disconnected and completely weird and completely experimental. And it's just like it was so wacky almost, and it's like punishing in a way. Like, it was baked into the game system of how punishing it was. And I want to say that that is why partially old MMOs never took off, in a way, right? Because of those situations. And yes, there was a Star Wars MMO. People who don't know there was a Star Wars MMO, there was a Star Wars MMO. Long before Old Republic, by the way. It was a different beast. Completely different beast. It was not about the Old Republic. It was just about something else, I think. But still, what do I say? Yeah, it definitely has that vibe of people who are too prideful to look at other games. It definitely had that vibe because they was like, we have this thing that works and we will do this thing that works.
Is it good?
It's shut down. It shut down. It was long shut down. It came out MMORP original Final Fantasy for original Star Wars MMO. It shut down. Let me see. Star Wars MMO.
Sad.
Yeah, it shut down. But then there was systems where you needed to farm stuff to become a Jedi. You could be a different. You could be a trader. You could be. It was very sandbox MMO. Very sandbox MMO, unlike the Old Republic, which became a more story-focused MMO. But yeah, it was one of those standout titles, I think, that people really wanted to enjoy. But there was a lot of problems on that end as well. So I think at the end it didn't really survive for as long as people would have wanted it to. But ultimately, I think the successful games that's successful to this day, they need to look at other games in order to produce content that would rival those other games, because they can see what other games are doing well and what can be improved upon, and they can rise above their contemporaries by utilizing what could be done better and doing it better. And that's how they retain their long lifespan. But a lot of the Western developers, they look at the successful titles, like Baldur's Gate 3, for example. A lot of the successful developers right now, they looked at Baldur's Gate and went, "Oh, it's so unrealistic. You cannot expect us to do this. It's so bad. Don't give us expectations like that. We can't do it. It's just like, instead of looking at that and saying, hey, we can learn a lot about this, but they do this shitty, or they do that bad, and they don't do this quite well. We can just take those lessons and then improve it with our own kind of thing here, and we can rise above that Baldur's Gate 3 and establish ourselves as really good RPG, for example, or like new Assassin's Creed. Oh, I see this, they did this well, or like a new, I don't know, new game, new Dragon Age. right? There's like Dragon Age developers look at Baldur's Gate 3 and go, oh, interesting, they did this, that, this and that and that. Maybe we could implement this and this and that. But no, they won't do that because they're too prideful for it. They won't. They will completely disregard everything that is basically done by everyone else because they know what they know best, and everyone else can suck ass. And there will be developers that openly criticize successful games because they don't do it how they do it, and they consider themselves to be the epitome of the game dev, which is not true. Completely not true. Like it's not even like it's not even close to the truth.
で特に14の場合に関してはもちろんファイナルファンタジー11の超巨大な成功体験というのが邪魔をしたっていうのもあるとは思うんだけど
And they were thoroughly looked at and studied it and played it. And applied that sort of knowledge in order to make 11 such a great game. It's like you're trying to open a new restaurant when you're going and go absolutely no research on the surrounding competitors and open up a new restaurant, right? Yeah, that sounds ridiculous.
And so, just at the launch stage, then.
That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Like if you really think about it, try to open a new car industry without looking at cars produced. Try opening a new restaurant without looking at any other restaurant in the area. Try doing anything new and then continue not looking at your contemporaries and not taking ideas from your contemporaries and see how long will you function. You will not. But apparently gaming industry is where people are so prideful and so completely ignorant of how business is actually done that they think they're the center of the world and everyone else must do how they do, or they're bad. And it's such an interesting mentality to have, considering how much failures and underperforming titles there were in the last 5 years. And I sit here and wonder exactly how long will it take for these developers to realize that they are not the center of the universe. And these higher-ups, specifically higher-ups developers, to realize that they are not the center of the world and they are not the best at what they do. And if they stop evolving, they will completely stagnate and stop being even decent, really.
What was the feeling within Square Enix? The beta was quite close to launch. Were people anticipating that there would be negative feedback, or
yes,
were they less aware that was going to happen?
Dude, of course. Look at that smile. He knew. This was Pedro's born. I mean, at that time, of course. Whatever the MMO launches, I know they didn't attempt to get up in arms. And they tried to complain about it. Yeah, but I think development team does do several stress tests. But of course, the player wants to play it as soon as they can. So of course, it is anticipated that the server crashes and things like that. So I mean, I wasn't involved in the team, so I was looking at it from the outsider perspective. And I was thinking that because it is the same team who worked on 11, so I thought it was just the consumers complaining to the high level of competition of completion of Final Fantasy 11. And I thought so eventually that sort of animosity would die down. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment to make. But coming from an insider perspective, there were apparently a number of people within the original development team that thought that if we continued moving forward with this, we were in a very bad situation. Yeah, the community Square Enix had turned around and turned to those people that, well, that's how it was for Final Fantasy XI launch. We had missing functions that were a lot of negative feedback, but we were able to patch it up and fix it. So the company had decided to conclude the beta phase and then go into launch. That information that I found, with some developer staff members after I joined the project, But yeah, there were ED people within the development team that did raise their voice that it was deep shit, basically. The company had ultimately decided to move forward anyway. Yeah. So I guess that was like basically that's why a lot of companies are such a complex puzzle. Like you can like point at one person, like director, programmer, like person, like one person in the group, and say you're to blame. But usually it's not the case. Usually it's really not the case. You cannot really blame one guy on a team for the entire game not functioning well, because that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Lots of people probably did already point out those mistakes, be it on QA team, be it on localization team, be it on everything. But the higher ups decided to, it's good, it's cool. We're gonna fix this anyway later, or we're not gonna fix it anyway because it doesn't really because cutting corners. It's like you don't need those to fix this because it's not consistent, it's not game breaking, so this bug will stay in. That's how a lot of Bethesda development, I think, happens, because there's like, this okay, it's fine. We will just let the community fix it. That's how they think at this point. And a lot of the game developers, even back then, 2010, 2011, they were considering the rise of the internet and the rise of the being able to upload content to the game after the game was already shipped out. That concept basically corroded a lot of the gaming developer principles. Because before that you needed to complete the product. Now the deadlines are a thing, and you might not complete the product because you know that there's a patch option. There's an option to finish the product after the launch and then patch it in, and that forever changed the entire process of how games are developed now, because you can just patch it in later. It's fine. Patch it in later. I don't want to deal with this shit now. I want to. Someone else can patch it later. That's basically it. There is no passion to fix these things. There is no passion to really try to fix these things. And I do not blame the developers for having absolutely no passion to fix these things, because the crunch is mind-blowingly hard as well. Crunch, the stuff that happens in the company, everything is just so overbearing, I'd say, that it's hard to feel any concrete passion for the game you're producing. So people don't.
Eventually, corporate realized that this wasn't usual launch problems.
Yeah, eventually.
Called on a few select members of the team to create a task force. This task force would research what changes the game needed and the resources the development environment would require to do the work.
Yeah.
Members of that team would talk to Yoshida-san about their worries after hours. His thoughts were that the current organizational structure would need to be modified if the team was going to make the changes required.
Yeah.
In October of 2010, Yoshida-san talked to the then Square Enix president Yoichi
Iwata
and suggested they initiate a company-wide emergency to get the team the resources they needed.
Yeah.
Wada-san spent a few days talking to the 14 development team about their concerns, and while a lot of the team had suggested that the current task force was in fact up to the task, some members of the 14 team had pleaded to have Yoshida-san join the project to help. And so it transpired that in late November, corporate took the decision to remove Hiromichi Tanaka from the team and move Nobuaki Komodo from director to lead designer. Both of their vacant positions would be filled by Yoshida-san.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the best decisions they made ever. Square Enix putting Yoshida in the leadership of the Final Fantasy 14. Because he was a leader. He still is a leader. He may not produce content that is up to everyone's tastes. There are people who hate Final Fantasy 14, and I understand it. People who don't like the structure of Final Fantasy 14, and I understand it as well, because no game is supposed to be made for everyone. But unlike the Final Fantasy 14 1.0, it was a game that was streamlined around the vision of this person instead of catering to like all the little visions that everyone else had. Maybe it's casual, maybe it's too story oriented, maybe it's like maybe it's not even like an MMORPG. It's an RPG that is like MMO a little bit, right? But it is a vision that he created for the company's product, and he still pushes it to this day, 10 years later. Right, more than 10 years later, he still continues pushing it today, and they are successful. So much they are coming in with the new expansion eventually soon. They're successful. They're one of the most successful MMOs or RPGs ever. Player count. Their play count is like decently right now because it's like in the middle of the patches between. It's like in the middle between the old expansion and the new expansion. There's probably not going to be nearly as much players. Player count. Yeah, average player is 20,000. Yeah, it's basically on Steam specifically. But total players and like tracked, it's number 4 right now in player count. Final Fantasy XIV, at least out of those tracked by MMO population sites. Number 4, total amount of players nearly 50 million, and the average daily players is in the realm of 900,000, at least tracked. That is like insane. That is like one of the best. That is like no other upper, like that is like Baldur's Gate level of stuff on their peak stuff. That is, but like daily, they have this amount of players daily, just every day playing, like nearly 900,000 players just every day play this game, because there's something to be had. There's role players, there's crafters, there's story followers, there's new players, there are old players, and everything just play. Right, and that's how hard it turned around, right? Maybe it's not the second most played MMO, but
at that time he was leading a team that was working on an original IP for Square Enix. He was disappointed to leave that team, but excited for the opportunity to work on one of the company's crown jewels, a numbered Final Fantasy game. So he got right to work.
やらなきゃいけないことが当時3つあると思ってて。まあ順番にやってったんですけど、まずそのチームに、まあオリジナルのチームにトップが変わります。
So that's from the original team, and then the team task force was going to sort of like the lead. It would be a core team that was involved in the development, yeah. And because I was on the Grand Quest side, I did not know these people on the development team. Obviously. I know the familiar faces, yeah. But I hadn't had a chance to work with these people. I was definitely just saying hello. That was kind of like my beginning. I told them that because I have not worked with you, so it's, if you don't like what I do in my job, you're more than welcome to leave the team. Yeah. But please give me about 3 months to work together to see what we're like. Yeah. What do you like and what I'm like. And that's the kind of talk that I delivered during my speech. That's a good speech to make, honestly. You don't want, this is not like coming in like my way or highway. Like this is not coming in like this pompous leadership kind of thing. I am the rock star of gaming. A lot of the big leads they tended to also develop this I am the rock star kind of the mentality, where it's just like they're the best person in the room. And even then, to this day, there's like you have these game leads that are like, oh, this game lead, like, but without the team, they would be nothing. Effectively, but they just think too much of themselves. They cannot produce the same results that they did when they worked together with their team and put their talent to use alongside their team, instead of like, oh, I am this cool person, I am this best gaming developer ever, everyone must listen to me because I know best, I know everything. It's just like, no, it's a machine. You're a cog. You're maybe an important cog, but you're still a cog. So you should approach it as a cog. You're like, okay, I'm gonna be working here. I'm gonna be leading this train somewhere, right? Please listen. Please let's work together for a little bit and see if we gel together or not. If you don't want to work with me, you can just leave, right? If you want to work with me, you can stay, right? You have no obligation to stay. Just give me this time to introduce myself to you, and like give me the time to see if we truly can create something great here, right? That's a good speech. It's a good speech. Good speech. Jesus Christ. I mentioned to them I have going to make this challenge one more time. Yeah.
まあ当然その時その
At that time, we didn't have any plans of a Realm Reborn just yet, but I did communicate that we're going to give up on this project, and we're still going to push through.
僕を知ってる何人かはよしやるぞっていう人たちと
Yeah. And some people reacted like, this is impossible, you put in too much on us. Yeah.
なんだよこの
And some people just got frustrated because they did not like what was going on. So I think that was kind of general reaction I got. Yeah, I think I imagine at this point the team was like really disheartened, and the morale was like really fucking low at this point. And I totally get that. I would be absolutely fucking devastated if the game I worked so hard on completely crashed and burned, and I knew it will crash and burn because of how development went. And I was like, and then just guy comes in and is like, hey guys, we're just gonna do it again. We're just gonna spend our entire life's resources again to just do this again, and then we don't know if it works. We don't know if it will work. We don't know if it will even like if it's like even worth it at this point. Is it really worth it at this point? There was a team member on 14 sound team even now. My she's Soken, yeah, Soken. Where I was like, what was when I did the speech in the large hall to develop a team, and I was like charged with adjusting my microphone there. And when I delivered the speech, he was the only one I can still clearly remember. It was like, yes, I'm gonna do it. Yes, I'm gonna do it.
I saw both reactions. I saw oh my god, we just went through a year of hell, and now he's asking us to go through
another hell. Yeah, again.
To this point that might
not yeah,
because no one had taken a game and rebuilt it
in this
manner before.
And no one has taken and rebuilt this game in this manner since. No one. Chad, if you're here, if you're still here and have not fallen asleep, do you know a single game that has underwent this kind of change before, where a game was completely crashed and burned, then was completely rebuilt from ground up, and then re-released again to complete success? Not complete, but to success. I think the only game I can sort of imagine at this point, but it was not like even like a rebuilding situation. It was more like a patching situation. The only game I can think of would be No Man's Sky. But then it was a continuous process over the years of development, of the years of live development of the game. It wasn't something like that, where the game was basically crashed and burned. Then the old version of the game was maintained, and then the game was basically replaced with the new version that was built from ground up. Ultimately, No Man's Sky was the same game, still the same game to this day. It's still the same game, but it's like much more polished, much more feature-rich, much more complete. It's still the same game. It's not a completely remade game like it was before.
He's saying like, yeah, you just have to trust me, and yeah, you could, waste another. Year and a half of your life, and it could be a failure, and but you're gonna have to believe me on this one.
You're gonna have to believe me on this one, yeah.
People are like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know. And I can understand that because again, it was a gamble. But then on the other hand, there were, a lot of us, myself included, but a lot of people on the team that were like, no, we worked so hard on this, and we did our jobs the best that we could. But for a lot of reasons,
and circumstances,
out of our control.
Yeah.
Decisions made by higher ups, decisions made by other teams that affected our work, and nothing that we could do about it. But we had put our all into it, and we were invested in the project.
At this point, it was make it or break it, I think. And we were. It was also for the players. Like we were, not me exactly, but people who were playing. Like even a friend I was playing with, was watching him play. He was like, at this point, it was make it or break it. Either they do some drastic changes, or eventually, the game's core fan base that had built up from people who had hoped that it will become better, it will slowly start to trickle away until nothing left. So they had to do something radical. The only way to change the project, the only way to save that project was to do something radical about it. And they did eventually do something radical about it.
we still believed in the project.
Yeah.
To have someone from the outside come in and not just come in to say, okay, forget it, we're just going to do it my way.
Halfway, yeah.
He asked our opinions. He laid out a roadmap. He gave us a vision and a hope. And even though it seemed like it would be difficult to achieve, it didn't seem inconceivable.
Yeah.
GP knew there was no time to wait. He worked with corporate to make sure the team had time off, both for them to relax, but also to give him time to build his new vision, to do research playing other MMOs, to help draft his plan, to deliver the vision and how the team was going to do it. They had very little time to fix this game, so once they started, the specifications document would have to be watertight. And as captain of the ship, he needed to be able to answer every question the team may have.
The sheer magnitude of what Yoshi P managed to do here, I think, is completely undersold by a lot of people who don't really realize how corporate machine works for the development of products. The sheer thing he achieved, I think, is monumental in its magnitude because of how many moving pieces there are in a company like that, how many moving pieces there are in development of the game, how many moving pieces there are in human resources, basically people doing their people things, mistakes and everything. Just consider it you will see exactly what the ridiculous amount of work the team did in this time, but the fact that they actually managed to do it is a monumental achievement on the side of the captain, because he did it. He did this vision, he organized everyone, and he did manage to help them achieve their full potential no matter what. I think that's an achievement that should be given to Yoshida here.
Quickly.
Yoshida-san was now at the helm of his first Final Fantasy, and as an avid MMO fan, he was looking forward to getting in there and fixing it. What he couldn't have known at this stage was the scale of the job.
The scale of the job was,
no matter how much they patched Final Fantasy 14 online, they couldn't ever fix it. What they'd have to do was something that no developer had ever done, to rebuild an entire MMO while the original version was still running.
I don't think that they realized immediately that it was something that couldn't be solved via patches. I think they still believe that, if we patch it, it'll be fine. And it wasn't until they reevaluated and then brought in, the new blood. Yoshida-san came in and told them, okay, yeah, this is not something that can be patched. If we want to fix this, we're going to have to take a drastic step.
He spent 7 weeks researching and returned with 2 options for corporate. It was then he realized that it would be impossible to convert the current game into an MMO that could last the test of time.
No.
Ultimately, though,
even the players realized back then that it was impossible, because they had played no people understand the game better than avid MMO players, especially avid players of a bad MMO, because they realize exactly where the problems are, exactly what could be done to make it better, and they have their own vision of what exactly could be achieved in order to. And even then, I was talking to my friend. I was like, "Yeah, this cannot be fixed. This needs to be This needs to be remade." Like, even my friend, he was like, "This needs to be just remade at this point. This they cannot possibly hope to just patch it in, like, because there's some fundamental problems. They cannot be just baked out. The game will just fall apart if they take those fundamental things out, right? So they need to be taking the framework and completely redo the fundamentals here. Like, he was not sure how they would do it, but if they could do it, they would save the game."
This was a decision that corporate had to make, so he returned with not one, but 2 plans.
2 plans, Plan A and Plan B. I remember this part.
During this meeting, he explained that Plan A would be to patch the game and make it more playable.
Yeah.
But that ultimately the game would never really satisfy players.
Never.
And though Square Enix may make their money back, the damage to the online brand would be
catastrophic. And that's the most important part.
B.
Yeah.
今のファイナルファンタジー
I remember this part.
オリジナルのファイナルファンタジー14をパッチを当ててそのできる限りポジティブに遊べるものにしながら裏で全く新しいそのファイナルファンタジー14をもう一度作り直すっていうのがプラン B でまあその
Completely new Final Fantasy, as you can see. First, listen to those 2 options, or would have been what you would try and talking about trying to divide the team. That's a hard question, but I told them also because we had promised our fans that we would release a PC3 version. Yeah. We need to launch this within the life cycle of PS3. So we wanted to get the game out, if not by the end of 2012, then summertime within 2013. Of course, there was a very high risk, and we've never done it before in the games industry. On top of that, we're releasing it under the same title. Yeah. But I think it lasts, at least by taking on this challenge, we'd get the fans to realize that Final Fantasy is going something crazy again. Yeah, something really great. Yeah. And they will see our effort to trying to regain their trust and trying to make good on the damage we had caused the franchise. That was my presentation to corporate. And I was going to leave it up to them to decide upon option A or option B. Obviously, ultimately, they chose the option A or B. B. They obviously chose B in the end, which is surprising. Someone in the corporate actually decided to give the chance, give the gamble a chance back then, and now we have this game. We have this story, this massive fucking story that spans years and years and years and years, and we have one of the best, one of the most acclaimed MMORPGs today. If we didn't, I think we wouldn't have Final Fantasy 16 quite the way it is. We'd have this. We wouldn't have a lot of the current stuff that Yoshida does. We wouldn't have a lot of those things. I think it really is a game. I think it really is important to see that if the Square Enix wasn't as fluid as it is, a lot of their bad habits would have taken over long ago. So even now, with their new bad habits, I think they will shake those bad habits eventually as well. And we are here we are today. Yeah.
Final Fantasy 14 1.0 was in a state of disarray. Enix had decided to suspend subscriptions to help ease the negativity around the game, while the PS3 version was indefinitely postponed.
Yeah, they definitely completely canceled the subscription, and you could play for free, basically.
For the next 2 years, Yoshida-san and his team would work tirelessly on not one, but two MMOs, patching the original 1.0 to fans' expectations, while secretly working on a brand new version of Final Fantasy 14.
Yep. So the game came out in 2010. Some turmoil, several months happened. Then they spent 2 years, till 2012, till middle of 2012, fixing things, I think. And then they released in either 2013 or something along that lines.
In our next episode, we focus on that 2-year period and tell the incredible story of the falling moon of Dalamud, the death of 1.0, and the birth of a new AOR.
I was there. It was a magical experience. Really was. But yeah, I'm gonna go away for a second there, here to do something. But yeah, it was something, wasn't it? It was quite something. It was definitely an experience in a way.